that's the first time you realize that when you're the center of attention, there's nobody, everybody can hear you scream, but nobody can help you.
Hi, my name is Nancy Hardcastle. I'm a speech coach, and my mission is to help public speakers stand up, be great, and create radical change in the world. Today, I'm talking to Jim Harvey. Hey, Jim.
Hello, Nancy, and hello, everybody.
Thanks for talking to me today.
Pleasure.
If you're a public speaker, you know that when you approach your audience and you're ready to speak, you have a lot on your mind. You're hoping that your hair looks good and you don't have food between your teeth. You're hoping that your audience is going to receive you kindly and that they're not going to heckle you. You need to remember everything that you wanted to say. Apparently, you need to not fall off the stage. This is a thing. I just saw that the actor who got the award for Best Actor this year for his portrayal of Freddie Mercury fell off the stage after he received it. I saw a picture of him there clutching that Oscar. But nevertheless, below the stage, people around him were horrified. And if that wasn't enough, you also have to hope that your tech is going to work. And that's why we're here today. If you wish that you never had to think about tech again, you are in luck because Jim is here to save our technically challenged behinds. I'm so grateful. So,
Pleasure.
Jim, my first question is, am I blowing this out of proportion? I'm a public speaker. I'm not a tech person. Can I not just trust the tech person and just do my thing and let them worry about this?
Of course you can. You can trust the tech person, and the vast majority of tech people that you meet are brilliant, but they don't know you, and they can't anticipate what you've got and what you bring in and what you need to work and the films that you want to show and the clips that you want to play and the music. So in reality, if you just trust the technical person, actually you're opening yourself up to making a fool of yourself. And as you said right at the start, for your audiences, you're talking about hugely important issues that affect everyday people's lives. You're not just selling a product, so you're not just rallying the troops at a year-end thing. Tech means if it all works well, nobody sees it, and you are as good as you possibly can be. Mm-hmm. When anything goes wrong, it's a pretty special speaker that can rise above it.
Mm-hmm. So, unfortunately, what you're saying is that the tech person is not God. They're not omniscient. They can't be everywhere all at one time or know everything, and so we have to worry about this.
Yeah, you do, and I think the vast majority of tech people want to help you, mm-hmm. But I think in reality, if it's a big conference, if there's lots of speakers, you're just one of their priorities, and don't put yourself in that position. Mm-hmm.
You sound like you know what you're talking about. Tell us who you are, what you do, and how it's related to public speaking.
Yeah, well, I think it's always a good question. Everybody that you speak to, if you're speaking about this kind of stuff, in their own heads are asking that question. Well, why should I listen to this person? What have they done? What experience have they got? And I've been making speeches. Really, I found out that I was okay at it when I was 7 years old, and one of my teachers said, "Would you host the Harvest Festival at school?"
Wow.
Yeah. So me and a girl called Jackie, we stood up and we did the best that we could. And even, I'm not making this up, even at that first Harvest Festival back in 1971, somewhere in England, there was a technical glitch. Something was supposed to happen and it didn't happen. And Jackie looked at me like this, as if I knew what to do. And that's the first time you realize that when you're the center of attention, there's nobody, everybody can hear you scream, but nobody can help you. And so I set up a consulting business when I was 25 years old. Um, because I found out that I could speak a little bit and I was interested in speech writing and great speeches in history. I got a first client who heard me speak at, I think it was a rugby club event, and thought that I could help them, and they paid me to do some stuff. And I left my job and set up as what I didn't know was called a consultant then. I've built consulting businesses since then. I've worked with thousands of speakers. I've written hundreds of speeches. I've bought and sold businesses, and I work all across Europe and parts of the world at some time, helping people to sell their stuff more effectively. And a major part of that is me standing up on stage and making a case for things. Yeah, so, and I've made hundreds and hundreds of mistakes, some of which we'll talk about now, and I'm not dead. It's unlikely that I'll die from making a mistake, and I just think it's about sharing some of those. And confidence is a blend of skills and experience. And I started off with more skills than experience. Built up my experience and found out that I needed even more skills, and that's where I am today. I'm sure it's the same for you and all of your listeners. We're sane people are as confident as their experience should allow them to be.
Yes.
Insane speakers, it doesn't really matter what their experience is. They think they're brilliant, and that's usually enough for them.
Right. And it's kind of amazing. People can get away with that sometimes, at least for a while.
Yeah, and as we're seeing all across the world, without making any there are lots of people in power in Europe at the moment who
well, we won't mention my country.
Wouldn't dream of talking about your country. Please, not it's too difficult.
Okay. Yeah, we'll stay away from that topic.
Yeah.
So you wrote an article a few years ago called "The 5 Most Common Tech Problems for Presenters and How to Avoid Them." And this is how I found you. This is what caught my eye, because I thought this is the kind of information that the people who listen and follow what I'm doing really need to know so that they can avoid having these problems when they go speak. So if you could run through the ones that are relevant for us now in 2019, and why don't we start there?
Yeah, okay. The whole article was prompted by me turning up at a world famous business school to talk to MBA students about how to get your message across to make a sales presentation. And I'd worked at this place a lot, and I turned up with quite a complicated presentation with videos and slides and sound and all of those kind of things. And absolutely nothing worked for whatever reason.
Nothing.
And, as we all do, you look back at it as a professional and you say, what went wrong? And there were some pretty simple things that had gone wrong on that day, that were partly to do with me, but also partly to do with the university. So I'll take you through. So firstly, taking a Mac to a gig and expecting it to work, right? Lots of us have it's like politics, we're a Mac user or we're a PC user.
So even if you love your Mac.
Yeah, that's right. And I started off as a fantastic follower of Microsoft, actually. But as our clients, you turn up to our clients and our clients would say, yeah, but we use Mac here. You just go, God, no. But anyway, you realise that there's, in every religion, there's good and bad. And so, at this particular time, because I'd used it there before, I took this high-end MacBook Pro and plugged it in. And just for various reasons to do with software and upgrades and videos, it didn't work. So basically, the first thing, as we all know, it's pretty simple, but, Macs nowadays, HDMI has changed this, that there are many ways that you can connect a Mac to a projector or a television. And in the old days, I'm just going to pick up props. The only way you could do it was through something like that. So
I have one of those.
Of course you do. But if you've got sound, if you use one of these, the sound doesn't travel through the. So there's that. One of the things that you were going to say to me later is how has things changed in the last 5 years? Well, actually, HDMI, that classic HDMI cable now. Most Macs and most PCs have an HDMI connector which take video and sound. So that's the first thing. But if you're using a Mac or if you're using a particular piece of equipment, it's a really good idea to check with the tech person, the conference organizer, or the hotel before to make sure that they have the connector that you need to connect it. Because
so can you, sorry, I was going to jump in. Can you describe what that HDMI looks like just so that people know which one you're talking about?
Yeah, I can. So basically what I've got here is I've got for one of my Dell PCs, they make you buy a little USB connector like this. Mm-hmm. In it is every kind of connector that you'd want for video ports. Right. So that's this one here, if you can see it, is your classic RGB connector that is 20 years old. And this little slot here is an HDMI connector. Okay. So if most projectors and televisions now will have the male version of this cable that fit into this HDMI connector. The brilliant thing about HDMI is that it takes video and it takes pictures and sound. Every manufacturer, and this is another thing that's changed in the last 5 years, that every manufacturer, because they want to make slimmer and lighter PCs that are lower cost to manufacture, they will usually provide you with something like this, and this is Dell's version of it, that is a port that allows you to connect to other devices. Right. So if you bought a new laptop, and this was part of my problem way back, was that I bought the latest Mac and something had changed in it that I didn't know about, and I didn't have the right connector available, which is pretty unforgivable, but there you go. I forgave myself eventually.
There you go.
So so I say, don't take your Mac to a gig and expect it to work. Don't take your fancy new Microsoft tablet or Google tablet or whatever and expect it to work. Mm-hmm. Give yourself a chance, give the tech people a chance, tell them what you're using, send them photographs of your adapters, and do that before you get to the gig. And more often than not, you can, you'll be okay.
So it might feel like overkill, but what you're saying is do the overkill and be sure.
Absolutely right. Because, it takes me back to another story that actually on that day, I was there an hour beforehand. I realized that I had a problem. I could fix most of the problems on the day and actually just cut chunks out of the thing that I was going to do. Or if there were videos that I wanted to show that were on YouTube or Vimeo or any other thing, and you just stitch it together like that. But I think the big test, particularly for all of us really, is if the tech doesn't work, can you still make your speech?
Exactly.
There's that classic thing. People say, well, the great speeches of history, the Gettysburg Address, for example, wouldn't have been improved by PowerPoint slides. The answer is, actually, if Steven Spielberg was directing, it probably would have been better. And Abraham Lincoln was a notoriously sort of old-fashioned speaker, even for the time. But if we're doing a 30-minute speech about some really important issue to us, make sure that you can do it without worst case, because then actually nothing matters if you can do that stuff.
Right. I think for me, it's almost a moot point comparing it to 100 years ago or 200 years ago, because everybody's accustomed to the way it is now.
It is true.
And that's what they're expecting. And I agree with you that, boy, you better be ready to deliver a Grand Slam performance without slides.
Yeah.
But if you've got those slides and they're great, or you've got music and it's great, use it.
It's really true. I mean, you are right with that, but I mean, just a bit of a challenge, as you
Sure.
know and I know, that actually most people's slides are rubbish, and actually don't help them make the point that they want to make. So sometimes
Yes.
there's that beautiful moment where, the projector breaks down halfway through and the presenter carries on, and you realize that now you understand what they're saying,
Yeah.
because there's not this hypnotic sort of white light shining onto a screen that's conflicting with the speaker. But anyway,
Yes.
yeah, if you've got your shtick, if you've got your slides, I mean, what do we use slides for? We use videos, we use slides, we use pictures for emphasis. So yeah, if you've created a really emphatic set of visuals to help you make your point, absolutely make sure that it's right. I mean, in the post, we talk about, there's lots of examples of videos that you'll link to, I'm sure. There's
Yes.
Bill Gates demonstrating a Microsoft product way back in the day when Bill still had, wasn't married, had billions of dollars, needed a better suit, but he's demonstrating his product and it doesn't work.
Right.
And so, it happens to the best of us.
And he went on like a pro.
Yeah, he really did. He did. So there's all of those connection issues
Okay.
that you can check in advance. But again, sometimes organisers want you to send them your slides in advance. And again, I would say that if you're going to do that, there are a few things that you need to check if you're sending your slides to a conference organizer and you're going to turn up there, be handed a remote control and start to speak. I mean, and usually it's basically, do the video files work? If they're installing your presentation onto a third-party PC or laptop to project, does that PC have the right video filters? And sometimes it goes back to sort of Mac and Microsoft kind of issues. But if you've created a video on QuickTime on a Mac and installed it into PowerPoint and saved it, and you try and play that same presentation on a conference PC that doesn't have the right filters the right software installed, then the video won't play. If you're using PowerPoint on a Mac, for example, and you're saving it as a PowerPoint file type, sometimes just by saving it and then opening the same file on a PC in your office or your home will allow you to see if everything works.
Okay.
But you will always find, and also in these days of sort of great regulation, sometimes you'll try and open a file on a client's computer that you've emailed to them and it won't even let you open the file because there are active objects or stuff in there. But again, for me, the best way to test whether you've got it is send it to them a week in advance, have them test it and have them confirm to you that it's tested. If you can't do that, I've spoken at 2:00 in the afternoon at a conference, haven't been able to check anything, but I've got there at 7:00 in the morning while the tech guys are setting up and said, look, do you mind? Can we just check that all of this works now or at the coffee break or whatever? So you've actually seen it.
Yes.
And usually if you're polite, there are a lot of speakers whose egos are larger than their sort of courtesy. But most guys, most sound people that I've met are just fantastic to work with, and they want you to do well. So test it.
So the closer you can get to the actual thing, in other words, if you can actually play it on the machine or have somebody else play it, is the idea. Whatever the thing is in question, the closer to actual is safer.
Really. And, if it's a really important sort of speech or meeting for you, then, worst case, if you're on, if you're on at 9 o'clock in the morning, get there for 7 and, test it so that there's nothing worse than you feeling like you've done your cause. And in your case, Nancy, and lots of your audience, you're speaking about hugely important issues that affect people's lives deeply. You don't want to walk away feeling like you've let them down, do you? Another big change over the last 5 years, of course, which goes back to the root article that I wrote, is that now so much more is done online. Mm-hmm. So, you can upload your whole presentation to an online presentation system, and you can log on to it through a browser. Mm-hmm. And present it like that. You can add interactive questions and quizzes and polls and things. But again, right, you want to test it out because, it's one of the great things from some of the. So I think Steve Jobs can teach us a lot about, presenting. But there are some fabulous videos on YouTube where they've got a very complicated demonstration that requires a wireless connection. Mm-hmm. They've got 1,000 people in the room.
Oh, I saw that.
Also using devices, yes, and they try and do this thing, and there's not enough bandwidth. And I've been to conferences recently in it's heart of London or Berlin or New York, mm-hmm, where you're in a fabulously high-tech environment, mm-hmm, but just at the moment that you want to play this online video, mm-hmm, you lose bandwidth. Mm-hmm. And so again, my advice, unless you're working in the most sophisticated venue with the fastest broadband, mm-hmm, connection speeds, I think online for a big conference or a speech is still a risk. I used to say, it's a European reference, but I used to say, everywhere but France. Okay. Because there's just something. The French have resisted. Internet technology and American tech for so long, but you still go to these beautiful 17th century chateaux just outside of Paris, and it's like the internet has never been invented.
Oh my gosh!
And there's 1,000 people. There's 1,000 investment bankers there trying to get a signal, and they can't get any. So check all of those things. So if you've got online content, if you've uploaded videos to do that. I know it's really basic, but just make sure that it's going to work.
And it occurs to me too that you could check that with the empty room, but then when the room is full and people are on their phones, it might change. So it's almost like, even like when the room is 3/4 full, you better test it again, just to make sure. At least that will give you the 3 minutes heads up of don't use that section, which is enough.
It's true. And I think, most hotels, I think it's the same in the US as well. Mm-hmm. There's a difference between a conference center and a hotel. That with the best will in the world, if you're working at a Hilton, again, other hotel brands are available, but if you're working at a Hilton hotel in downtown New Orleans, you're not going to get the same kind of understanding and technical support as you would as if you were working at somewhere in, Cupertino or, Silicon Valley or whatever. So it's protecting yourself. And again, in the planning, you can think, right, what is knowing a little bit about the venue, knowing a little bit about what I want to say, what is the lowest risk tech that I can use and provide to do that? Yes. And I still think that putting it all online is too much of a risk for most of us.
And so,
unless you're absolutely sure.
Yeah. So besides the port that you might want to carry with you, what else might you want to carry with you?
Ports and connectors. I think remote controls as well. I would always take, I brought my bag of tricks. I'll just show them. So I take two remote controls. I take my own batteries, little sort of AAA batteries to do that. I take multiple versions of the same connectors with me. Wow. And it's something we'll come back to later, but even on my iPhone, for example, worst case, I'll have, I've got 2 iPhone-based presentation remote controls that if everything else fails and doesn't work, that I can use that. across the wireless to control my presentation as well.
Excellent.
Yeah. And just, if you've got a lot of tech to take with you, just simple things. I'd even take my own power strip sometimes because, because you can't guarantee if you've got two things that you want to plug in and there's only one plug. Just little things like that that I would try and take. Either get them in advance and make sure that they're there, or take them with you.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was saying to you earlier, for those people that work a lot in Europe or other parts of the world, every country in Europe has a different electrical socket. So I was just saying to you that, ladies and gentlemen, is the UK's contribution to world history, and everybody in the UK would say that's the best electrical socket in the world. Okay, it isn't. It's just an electrical plug, but every country in Europe has a different one of these. And just so if you're ever going to Europe, at the airport or via, your online store, make sure. What I tend to do is if I'm going to, because all of my plugs for the UK are like this, I would buy a single adapter. If I'm going to France, for example, I'd buy a single adapter. I'd plug my extension strip or whatever you called it into that plug. So I've got English plugs with me, and I only need one extension plug when I go there. Because I think particularly if people aren't used to going to, somebody else's house for, place of work to make a presentation, they travel in hope. They travel in hope and get there and just, I don't want those people who are listening to be disappointed,
Absolutely.
Just think about absolutely everything that you can do beforehand.
Yes.
Ask for help and you'll usually get it.
Yes.
But I've seen lots of people turn up at conference with like a memory stick, for example, with your presentation on a memory stick, give it to the tech woman, and she looks at him and says, "We can't use memory sticks here. We're in a regulated environment," and you just think, boom.
Right. Now.
It's hard.
Now
It's hard.
what? So we're almost out of time. Before I go on to the next question, was there something else you wanted to mention?
No, there was a little thing on the original thing, and I know it's a really simple thing, but for people that don't present a lot, one of the funniest things I've ever seen, I was working with a Dutchman, very stern Dutchman, who never smiled, who was very good at his job, but never smiled, who was making a presentation to his whole team, 300 people in a conference center in Germany, and he was 2 minutes into his presentation, and this sound of a little girl laughing and a horse neighing in the background came on. What he didn't realise was that his 7-year-old daughter had installed a My Little Pony screensaver on his work laptop the night before.
No.
And that, because he hadn't switched his screensaver off when he was going to present, came up behind him. Actually, it was brilliant because it was the first sign of humanity anybody had ever seen.
He was all so stern.
And he smiled and softened, and it made him human. But for a lot of us, that would be. So again, this whole thing about screensavers. If you're presenting with a laptop that's unplugged, your power saving setup will sometimes specify that it shuts the screen off or the hard disk down after 30 seconds.
Yes.
So if you're presenting unplugged or if you're presenting plugged, set on the settings of your computer, you can choose those power save. But just be careful about those. That was my last. Because if it happens once, most people will forgive you. But if it happens 7 times in a presentation, I think Barack Obama would struggle to,
Even Obama.
Even Obama, that's right. Yeah.
Well, I think that's...
Michelle would probably. Michelle would,
right.
Right? Barack would definitely not.
Yes. I miss Michelle.
Yes, yeah. Don't we all?
So could you tell us briefly how you saved yourself by telling a story when you had a tech problem?
Yeah, it's a... So, I was presenting at a conference and something went wrong. It wasn't my fault, but let's say that there was a power cut, and the screen goes blank, and everybody's looking at you, and people behind the scenes are running around like mad things. And I think it's just a really great habit to get into, is the way that you handle a mishap is the way that you'll be remembered. And Steve Jobs did a fantastic thing in his Apple iPhone launch. This happened, most important presentation of his life, and he told a story. And he told a story about him and Steve Wozniak when they were kids. They used to, and I did exactly the same thing. I didn't know that Steve Jobs had done it then, but make sure that if something like that happens, that you're okay with it. Give the people behind the scenes time to work and just tell them a story. You just, tell them a story about anything to do with the subject or something that you haven't mentioned or whatever. Gives people 3 or 4 minutes time to sort it out. And if they can't sort it out, you move on. But, no, again, I say to conference speakers, 1, nobody's dead. 2, get over yourself. Get over yourself. Because, this is not about you. You're completely innocent in this. But if you lose your temper or you get flustered, then you damage yourself. And 3, in 5 years' time, it won't matter at all. So it's just something about technical stuff will go wrong. You can protect yourself by doing lots of the things that we've talked about, but the end of the day and at the end of the meeting, it doesn't really matter. Even if what you're talking about is important, keep your dignity. Tell them a story.
There you go. And I'm such a story lover, so I appreciate that it can really save you. Well, and as you said, not just kind of redeem yourself and your dignity, but it's respectful to the audience that you're in a way entertaining them, you're giving them value even while this thing is going wrong. It's not as though you're just leaving them in the lurch, and I think that's important.
It's really true. And I think as well, that's if you're rehearsing, if it's a really important thing, you can rehearse that as well. You can stand there with a colleague and you can actually say, right, sometime in this presentation, unplug the projector. Great. What am I going to do?
Yes.
How am I going to handle it? Because it's going to happen. It doesn't matter when it does, but what's important is that you feel okay about it.
Yes. So really going the extra mile in the practice too.
I think so. Yes. I think if we can make the practice harder than the real thing, then like in lots of sports and things, if you make the practice harder than the real thing, then the real thing,
that's right,
will tend to go better.
So thank you so much for your time today, Jim. This is really valuable. And what I'll do is I'll go ahead and put the links that you gave me in the notes, and then I'll write a accompanying blog post that will list all the items that you said that you want to remember, either the equipment or steps like turning the screensaver off, so that people can see them easily.
Yeah, and there's in the article itself, which anyone is free to use and share and do those kind of things. There's lots of videos with examples as well. So it's been a real pleasure, Nancy. Thank you very much, and good luck to everybody out there and in what they're doing, because I'm sure it's much more important than what I'm doing.
Oh no, you're here teaching us. We need people like you.
It's a pleasure. It's an absolute pleasure.
All right, thank you again. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.